All right, so a big welcome back to everyone to the Boat Buyer Expo. The next session is really interesting, and I'm delighted to welcome and introduce two experts for you on a really interesting topic of boat clubs and fractional ownership. And we're going to look at boat sharing pros and cons. So it's a welcome to Marc Singleton. He's the Managing Director of Premium Nautical, the experts in Singapore on this topic. And also joining us is Mr. Luca Brancaleon from Group Beneteau. So Group Beneteau is in France. They're one of the major global boat distributors. He's the VP of Brands and Product Strategy, which also includes boat clubs, boat financing, and distribution. So very, very warm welcome to you both.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Okay, good to have you here. Okay, so we'll dive right into this really interesting topic of sharing. You know, in your experience and what's going on in the boating world at the moment, have you seen an uptick in the interest in boat sharing and the sharing economy? Maybe Luca, would you like to give a perspective from sort of a global angle?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I would just to precise that we are not a distributor, but we are one of the major manufacturer, okay, in the boat industry. So we distribute our boats through a very wide network of dealers all around the world. And some of them already do either boat clubs or sharing economy or fractional, okay. I would say there is a surge and a very strong increase lately in this kind of sharing economy. I think mainly for two reasons. I mean, we have a lot of newcomers that are approaching the boating industry right now, because also as a sort of reaction after the COVID pandemic and the COVID situation that we are living today. And second, there is also a lack of production and a lack of this availability of boats. So people are looking for different ways, obviously, to go boating. And I would say that, and I don't know if Marc will have to add something, but I would immediately say that the main difference between a boat club and a fraction is the legal part of it. Because when you are a fractional owner and the word already says everything, you have a partial legal ownership of the vessel, something that you don't have when you are part of a boat club. Okay. And then I think we will go into other details and advantages and disadvantages a little bit later.
Okay, fabulous, thanks. So a definite uptick and partially to do with the interest, but also the lack of supply, yeah? Marc, what about from sort of an Asia Pac and Singapore perspective? What have you been noticing?
Yeah, I think very, very similar pattern. I think the points that were made are very valid and relevant here. What we've definitely seen a big increase in interest in boat sharing. And I think the reasons are, as outlined, one is that there is certainly a big increase now in interest from people who perhaps haven't considered boating before, but because they're not able to travel, they're looking for other ways to entertain themselves and their families. And so a lot of our boat share customers, our clients that we've had in the last 12 months, have been first-time boaters. And that's been a very interesting development for us. And I think also the point about availability is very valid, that we just don't have the boats available that we'd like. It's a good time to be selling boats on one hand, but it's also frustrating because we can't get as many boats as we'd like.
Yes, okay, no, that's great. Okay, so let's jump into some of these different sort of terms and terminology. And Luca, you've mentioned it. So, you know, we've got fractional ownership, we've got equity share, we've got boat clubs. What else have we got? And perhaps we could explain the difference between them. Those are three. Are there any more that I've missed? Boat clubs, fractional ownership, equity. Is there any other terminology that people might have heard about and maybe a bit confused about?
I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, there's
Okay.
So maybe Marc, over to you. What are the difference between those different terms, and have I missed any terms out?
Well, I think simplistically, I mean, if you start with boat clubs, boat club is where you join a club, pay a fee, and you have access to any number of boats that they own, and you pay as you use them on a per trip basis or whatever it is. Fractional ownership is whereby somebody would buy the boat and then put it to a third-party company who would then look to sell shares in that boat. So it's, if you like, more akin to a timeshare that people will be used to with property, and actually sell a certain number of shares in a boat. So typically with 4 shares in a boat, so everyone buys a quarter share. They have quarter ownership and are responsible for a quarter of the running costs. The latter, the boat share, obviously gives people more use of the boat than probably the other two.
And is equity share and fractional ownership exactly?
Yeah, I would add that maybe.
Sorry, Luca.
Yes, both share and fractional ownership?
Yeah, is equity share and fractional ownership exactly the same?
Well, I would say that fractional ownership, as of today, I mean, requires in any case a company to formalize it. Okay, when I would say that I mean, in general, I would say that boat sharing exists for many years now, and people have been done that informally for many years between friends and family members, etc. And now, after a certain time, I mean, companies came across to formalize the system, and the system does. I mean, in Asia Pacific, there are multiple companies doing that. Some of our dealers already. I mean, if you take also the TMG, the multi-hull group in Australia, I mean, that's one of their main, let's say, specialties to do fractional ownership. But then, I mean, it's usual with bigger boats, I would say, and then you have boat maintenance and shared services and storage facilities, etc., to share the cost. And also, obviously, a greater advantage is also that you can have the possibility to have a larger boat than what you could afford if you would be only one. I mean, then there are obviously other advantages, but there are also other disadvantages, obviously, because the biggest factor, I mean, is pretty obvious, because you can get the time on the boat, but since you partner and you are a partner owners with somebody else, then you have to schedule with other people the use of the boat. So that's obviously one of the disadvantages that you have.
Okay. Anything else to add there, Mark?
Yeah, I think the other point to what Luca was saying was that you don't have the option to personalize it in the same way, because you are just one owner. So you basically you take whatever is provided at the beginning, and that's what you stick with.
Okay. So are there new types of co-ownership options that have sort of arisen in the last few years, or the options fairly, they've been around for a while?
I think they've been around for a while. I think probably there have been more focus from companies, as Luca said earlier, who see this as a legitimate business opportunity. So perhaps it's being pushed more, and people are now more aware of it than they were. But I don't think it's particularly new.
Okay. So what about boat clubs? We don't have many or any boat clubs in Singapore, Mark. So why don't we have boat clubs in Singapore? And then, Luca, are they popular in other parts of the world? Why are they not popular here in Singapore?
I think the simple answer to that is because of the regulatory requirements in Singapore, and that is that before you can actually use any form of powered pleasure craft, you have to have a license in Singapore, and that license involves time. So you've got to invest a few weekends in practical courses, then night courses, and then an exam. And so it's not something that people just tend to do on a whim. You really got to have an interest to want to do it. Once you have your license, then you have access to the boats. But without the license, you simply can't take a boat out on your own.
Okay. And Luca, you've obviously got a lot of experience with boat clubs. Can you just give us a little bit of a flavour of, where they are, and they're really good for this and that, and whereabouts would we go if we wanted to be part of a boat club?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I've heard that there is one in the Philippines, a boat club there. So, I mean, something is coming also to Asia, okay? And I think it's a very good system, actually, I mean, because it really puts away all the hassles, I mean, that a normal boater would have. And I mean, making a part, obviously, that we always love when we own a boat, because then it's our own. We can personalize it. We can go out whenever we want, etc., etc. But then, I mean, other than that, there are a lot of people today that want really to live the experience only. And most of it, I mean, the young generations as well, and also other people that owned boat in the past, but they don't have either the time, either the possibility to maintain a boat anymore. So in very short words, I mean, having the possibility to benefit of a full fleet of boats that give you the possibility also to go fishing, as to go sailing, as to go cruising with different type of boats, just paying an initiation fee and a monthly fee. This is a huge benefit, because you really use, I mean, the content, the full pleasure. It's just a turnkey package. I mean, you don't have to pay for an insurance. You don't pay for a berth. You don't pay for the maintenance of the boat. And so, I mean, actually, you get really the essence of the boat. And I would say also the boat clubs are very different from what is rental organizations. I mean, because sometimes the two get confused. But I mean, I think there is a very big difference, because rental facility, I mean, usually they don't offer all the extra services of a club. A club also tries to create a real community among the members. People help each other. They go out together. They also gather for other reasons. There is also a training that is given to all the different members to make sure that they are familiar with the boats they are using. Sometimes there is also a kind of reciprocity between different clubs. So when you are a club member in one town, then you can also go and visit some other location and use the same type of boats you are already familiar with. So I mean, it's also very easy for the members. I would say also that the rental facility, I mean, usually they are based in locations that are touristic locations only. When boat clubs, I mean, they are spread everywhere. And then well, usually rental location also have, I would say, a less variety of boats rather than a boat clubs. And then there are also boat clubs who, after a certain time, offer to certain member really to pick the boat that they want. And then, I mean, and boat clubs are also different from other kind of situations, like, for example, the boat sharing, like the sail time type, where there is, in any case, one owner that puts its boat and sell the shares of this boat, okay, to pay, let's say, less expensive, and sometimes also to gain some money from it. There are also a lot of dealers that join this activity to the fact of being a boat dealership. And actually, I mean, this happens both with the boat club activity, then with the sail time or the sharing activity, because in both cases, I mean, the dealers have multiple advantages. They have always a wide fleet of boats that are always available as demo boats. In period like this, where it's difficult to have the availability of boats that they would like to have because of the demand of the market, they could place some of their customers on those boats, and with one boat they can serve, or let's say put in a queuing system, I mean, a number of customers that they could not serve in another way, because they don't have to buy the boats to sell them. So I mean, there are multiple advantages to add this activity to a standard boat dealership. And I'm not talking about all the synergy that you can have if you run a marina, because I mean, if you run a marina or manage a marina as a boat dealer, then you also have other synergies, like, I mean, you have more fuel consumption, you have more traffic in the marina, et cetera, et cetera. So other synergies and other advantages.
Yeah. So Marc, there's some of the questions, like how do I avoid getting into a partnership with people I don't like, or people that it's going to turn sour on? So let's talk about some of those practical things from your experience. You know, have you had some horror stories of these things gone wrong?
No, we haven't, John. I mean, typically how it works here is that we find the shareholders for the boat. So we will market and sell individual shares.
Yep.
And once we get the number we want together for a particular boat, we then introduce them to each other. And I have to say, it's worked very well. They've all got on very well. They all tend to have similar outlooks. I mean, they're all interested in doing something a little more interesting. They're often young families, so they naturally have a commonality. And I have to say, to date, it's all worked very, very well. And a lot of friendships have been formed out of it as well.
So how does the time allocation work? So if I bought a quarter share in a boat, how does the time work?
That was very straightforward. We provide the calendar at the beginning of the year. So if it's 4 shares in a boat, that means that every other Saturday or Sunday you'll have a day allocated to you, and then we provide free use during the week. So we also put together a WhatsApp group for the shareholders. They then can communicate between themselves. If they want to swap, if someone has a birthday or something on a particular day and it's not allocated to them, they can communicate with the person who has it and agree to swap with them. And apart from providing the initial calendar at the beginning of the year, which includes bank holidays, etc., we rarely get involved. They tend to do all the swapping themselves.
Okay, that's great. And so the costs up front, just walk through how the costs up front work. You've obviously got the purchase cost, the ongoing costs, and what about unexpected costs? How are they all handled?
Yeah, well, typically when people buy a share, we include in the first year all the running costs, so they know they don't have any other costs to budget for in the first year. Thereafter, we estimate what it was likely to cost to cover things like berthing, insurance, servicing, regular maintenance, and of course, if there is a problem, if the boat has an accident, for example, it is insured, so we would then claim on the insurance. If somebody is responsible for causing damage to the boat while they have it, then typically that person will hold their hand up, and if it's not an insurance claim, they would actually cover it so that the other shareholders are not disadvantaged in that way. And to date, touch wood, it's worked very, very well, and we don't have very many problems at all.
Okay. And, if the boat starts to get a little bit older and there was, a $10,000 repair, is that just simply then split 4 ways?
Yes, that's how it works. But typically, the boats that we are offering the share on at the moment are new boats. So we order the boats in new. And I think the oldest boat we have on the program now is coming up for 4 years old. And those shareholders are now just starting to talk about perhaps replacing it with a new one, because the new version of the boat they have looks a bit cooler. It's got a few options they didn't have before. Maybe the engine's a bit bigger, that sort of thing. So having used the boat now for 4 years, they've got a pretty good idea of what it is they like from the boating, what they need from the boating, and whether the boat's the right one for them. They may decide that they want to go into a bigger boat, or they may decide, having experienced the ownership, shared ownership for 3 or 4 years, that actually they want to go their own way and have their own boat this time. It's a very good way to get into boating without having to really put the full amount of money into starting having the boat yourself at the beginning, whilst you still want to find your feet and find out exactly what it is you like and don't like.
That's great. And Luca, you've got a stable of sort of 11 boat brands, haven't you, under the group Beneteau stable? Which of those boats would you highlight that might be suitable for fractional ownership or equity share, and maybe for this part of the world in Asia? Do you have some particular brands that you think are particularly suited for this type of ownership?
Well, as I said, I mean, Lagoon and some of the Lagoon dealers are already doing that very well. I think Prestige is another brand that could be easily, shared and fractioned as a type of boat, and other yacht producers already do and offer that possibility. In terms of other possibilities, as you know, within the group, there is one of our brands, Beneteau, who has his own Beneteau Boat Club, and is at the moment only spread around France and Spain, and they are opening some locations also in Italy very soon. And I would say, that the demand and the interest is going up a lot. So people are a lot demanding and expecting, new locations to open soon, also for this reciprocity that I was mentioning before, because people are also expecting for the possibility to travel and go elsewhere, trying the same boats. And this, I would say, is giving them a kind of additional security because for two reasons. I mean, first of all, there is a strong brand that gives them a certain guarantee about the service. The second is the fact that they can found and they can rely on the same units. So when they become familiar on a specific boat on one location, that they know that they can find exactly the same in another location. So they know exactly, I mean, how to use it. And those are, I mean, the main factors that push people to go towards one club instead of another. I mean, obviously, the culture in Europe and in Asia, I mean, it's still very slow in approaching this kind of method. In US, I mean, it exists since many, many years, and there are already, I mean, more than 400 clubs all around the US. I mean, some of the biggest clubs, I mean, like Freedom Boat Club or Carefree or other clubs that are already existing there. I mean, they have more than 100 locations each, and that's something that is, I mean, really exploding. I mean, if you just look at the news, I mean, every day there is a new location opening and a new marina that opens a club. So, but that's because, I mean, offering so many benefits to the user, to the customer, to the member, and also to the dealer, to the marina, etc. I mean, it brings so many synergies, this kind of activity, that obviously, I mean, has a great success.
That's great, yeah. What about from your perspective, Mark? What are some suitable brands that you think are good for sharing?
Well, I mean, I think there are many brands that lend themselves to be suitable for this purpose. I mean, in our own case, Four Winds is one of our most successful. It's the right sort of boat with the bow rider, which is open, very much a day boat. People, especially when you're sharing, it seems to work that they go out for the day and bring it back at the end of the day rather than staying overnight on the boat. That adds additional complications and implications. So when you get into bigger boats, then these are things that you need to take into account. But at the moment, we tend to operate with Four Winds and with Grand Banks. Bigger, but Grand Banks, we have more shareholders. So on our Grand Banks, we have 6 shareholders. But again, the boat is used during the day, even though it's got cabins, it tends not to stay out overnight. And on the Grand Banks, it comes with a captain because the boat's bigger, it's more complicated, more complex. But with the Four Winds, they're designed as self-drive boats. So all of our members, all of our shareholders have to, in due course, get their license. It's okay for them to hire a captain for the day, but most want to do it themselves. So over the course of ownership, they'll get their license and use it themselves.
Okay, no, that's great. So I've got a couple of sort of wrap-up questions, and I just want to open it to you. Is there any other points that you think are important to share for people that are considering fractional ownership? I'm going to ask you for the 3 pros and the 3 cons. But before I get to that, have there been any questions that or bits that you want to share that we haven't covered so far? Is there anything you want to add, maybe Mark?
No, I think we've covered most of them. I think the shared ownership is an excellent way to get into boating, and particularly if you're new to boating, because not only are you sharing the costs, but you're also sharing experience, and it's a good way to get to know others who have a similar level of experience as yourselves, and you're learning together. And it's a very social way to do things. It keeps the budget tight, well controlled, so you know you're not going to get in out of your depth, and it's a good way of using the boat, getting the boat as often as you really need it, because people think, well, if I'm sharing the boat, I'll only have it every second weekend. But actually, in COVID permitting, when in normal times when we're able to travel more, it's not possible to use the boat every week. I mean, we've got other things to do. We've got children who are growing up and have got other activities and interests. So you get more than enough use out of a boat through quarter shares or sharing or fractional ownership.
No, that's good. What about downsides, Mark? I'll move to you in a moment, Luca. What about downsides? What would be 3 of the downsides for the compromises?
Well, like lots of people. I mean, people get to be quite proud of their boats, and they do with their cars or their houses. But the fact is, you're sharing it with other people, and so there is always the unknown. You don't know how the other person is using the boat and how it's being looked after in the same way that you might. Generally speaking, we found that not to be an issue, but that would be something in the back of your mind. I think the point was made earlier that you can't really customize the boat because you've got 3 other partners in there who might have a view. So everything has to be consensus, which is it's not a bad thing, but it means sometimes you can't perhaps do the things you want to do. Otherwise, I don't really see too many downsides. I think it's an excellent way to get into boating.
Okay, great. And Luca, what are your pros and cons of considering either boat clubs or fractional ownerships?
Well, I would say there are both, first of all, a very good mean also to try, because before making a real purchase, I mean, in some case, a boater, I mean, first of all, I mean, my first advice is always to go to a professional when you want to buy or even buy a share or a boat. And that's my first advice. I mean, the second thing is when you're going to buy a boat I mean, you're just thinking to go buy a boat. I mean, either buy a share or be a club member could give you, let's say, a first possibility to try for a longer time and really understand what kind of boat is the real boat for you, what kind of need you really have, what amount of time are you dedicating to this passion, etc. And it really gives you, I mean, it's just not like renting a boat for a couple of hours or when you go and see trial a boat for once. I mean, it's really giving you the possibility for a certain period of time to you, your family, your peers, to see and try. I mean, if this is really the right boat for you, and then, I mean, it helps making you the final decision. Then I would say, I mean, it's an easy also way out, because I mean, selling a membership or exiting a share system, I mean, it's pretty easier rather than maybe resell your boat because you made the wrong choice. So I think that's a very big advantage also for customers. I would add also that something we didn't talk about is that the boat management, which is, I would say, a little bit different from what we were talking about. It's something that is much more, let's say, impacting the sailboat business rather than the powerboat business. But it's very news today, and it also goes through, I mean, very formalized companies and organizations, I mean, big charter companies that are offering you, I mean, instead of just chartering a boat, but to invest and buy a boat, and to leave the boat in management within the charter fleet. And there is also, I mean, a strong reciprocity benefit, because, I mean, once you have your boat in one fleet location, then you can use a similar boat in another location. So you have weeks to spend and travel, I mean, elsewhere in the world. And it also gives you the possibility, in some cases, to have some revenues even. So it depends on the programs that pick. So this is also another way, let's say, to approach boating in a different format and in a different way. Other than that, I mean, I would say that other advantages, I mean, of a boat club, I mean, of a boat club, it's the fact that it provides a wide range of boat types and sizes, so you can pick and choose and try different things. And then, I mean, boat club prices are usually far less than buying most new boats. Then, I mean, you can plan and schedule your time ahead, do reservation ahead of time. So you can plan your time and pick the right boat that you want. And then, I mean, there are other advantages, because usually, I mean, you have a training, you are helped in the first time. Something that we usually do is also to join forces with the school for a boat license, because a lot of the new people that get boat license, I mean, when they get the licenses, at the end of the day, I mean, they really don't know yet how to use a boat. I mean, they just have the license, but in most of the cases, I mean, they even don't know how to exit the port. And so, I mean, they are afraid of buying a boat and just use it. So, I mean, being a member or doing a syndicate or buying a share, I mean, this helps them to be with other people, try, experience, be trained, and then, I mean, get sound enough to buy their own boat at a certain time. And I mean, and there is also a certain ratio of club members, for example, that after a certain period of time, they turn into real boat owners. So I mean that's a good way also to bring some new leads to our dealers to buy boats at the end.
You have a great stepping stone by the sounds of things. And Marc, it was really interesting for you to hear that the first timers are really jumping on this, which is great. So that's really really great information and very interesting to hear these different perspectives, guys. Thank you very much. In closing, can we come up with what's your number one tip for someone that's considering fractional ownership or boat clubs? What would you say to them? Your number one tip, Luca. What would that be?
Well, I mean, I repeat once again. I mean, my only advice is go to your local dealer, go to a professional, ask him, and he would be the right guy to give you the right advices and to point you in the right direction.
Okay, fabulous, thanks. And Marc, what would be your number one tip for someone that's thinking about doing this?
I think to do your homework and to talk to people and to get feedback about the club or the type of option that you're thinking of, feedback and response. Understand what's their experience been like, what are the positives from them, and they'll tell you also any negatives. It's the best way is to hear it from the horse's mouth.
Okay, great. So I hear that loud and clear. Go to a professional and do your homework. I really think that's great advice. Well, guys, I'd like to thank you very much for spending your time to come to the Boat Buyer Expo, share your expertise and wisdom. It's a really important topic, and I think you've shared some really good insights that people will be able to take away a lot of value from. So thanks very much. Appreciate it. And we'll see you on the docks.
Thanks, Dion.
Bye for now.
Make sure. Thank you. Bye. Cheers. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Okay,
bye, everybody.
Bye.